We are here at Qlik Connect this week. We were doing some Tech Field Day sessions. We've got a great group of delegates together, and we're learning about what Qlik is doing in the data space, and of course, because it's 2024, in the AI space. So I'm going to give all of us a chance to start off by just talking about what we saw here during the week at Qlik Connect and what we thought of the overall event, as well as our kind of key takeaway from the event. So Jay, I'll start with you.
So I took some time to walk around a little bit, have some conversations. One of those led me to the sustainability booth here on the expo floor. I saw NTT Data sharing some stories around the use of Aeolian data sets. So if you're familiar with anything related to climate modeling and what might happen with potentially sea rise over the next 100 years, what they were showing was on a 30 meter by 30 meter basis, what impact might mean. But then an ability to surface that data for a business context. So from an actuarial perspective, how can I make a better business decision based on these open available models that are out there in the world today for us to use? But how do I take that and make it real for business? So I thought that was pretty compelling. And if I could see anything about Qlik as an experience, there's something like a batteries included experience. They literally take the batteries out of the plastic, put that into the device, and then power it for you. So very simple, easy, and approachable way to do data-driven decisions.
So I had a lot of duality as I started reflecting on the things I saw and was interested in. I know I had a few issues with some of let me back up. I think the concept of an AI council is really important for organizations, but the first exposure we had to it, the presenter said a couple of things that really kind of kicked me back and rubbed me the wrong way. One of them being that data is the new oil, which from a sustainability standpoint, even from a data standpoint, it's just a weird way to talk about data. And then another one of showing the concept of people in the audience being guardians of the data, likening them to knights with all the shiny metal on, when we've had that kind of protection back in the day of data that's led to erasure of cultures and languages and everything else. So in my idea, that protection of data is so important for operational people with backups, but when you start talking about protecting the data, when you're trying to unearth things organically from all the data that you have to find new ways to do things, it's kind of a mismatch. The duality there was you bringing me again to their sustainability booth, and wow, Qlik has an amazing team doing sustainability. And they also they've been doing it like since the company has been founded. They give back so much. They make their software available to so many companies. In fact, they're just beginning to work with the UN's Council on Climate Change to give them the tools that they need from an AI perspective to float things up. The second thing was the community. So we were invited to the community's reception, which was fantastic. And I get to talk to the community leaders there that are just doing community the way it's supposed to be. And just watching the community members, it reminded me so much of really early days of the Expert, but also when we set up the Dell storage community. And I think that kind of stuck with me for a while. You've got these very, very impassioned users of a lot of different products that have been brought together by acquisition. And I think the duality there is, I think there's a little bit more to dig into there on how the community will stick together and stay together, since they are pretty diverse with a pretty diverse set of underlying technologies that's now all wrapped up into one platform.
Yeah, I'll kind of continue on what you were saying. I agree with you that one of the things that people are talking about quite a lot right now whenever you say AI is the question of power consumption and climate change and carbon emissions. And, it's one of those kind of things that people don't want to talk about in the room whenever we talk about AI. But, it's pop culture. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's saying, well, this global AI machine has now reached the level of the Netherlands, or it's reached the level of Brazil. That was the latest one that somebody said to me. I don't know if that's true, but it is important that companies are aware of that and that countries are aware of that. I spent some time with the lead from the United Nations Climate Change Commission, talking to him about the realistic way in which data and AI can help with climate change goals. And I think that the thing that came away from talking to him and talking to Julie about ESG, and then talking to the AI Council as well, is that they have a really nuanced and realistic picture of AI at Qlik. They understand that AI is coming, but they also have brought forward like that background in ESG and in concern for climate change and concern to try to do good. They're not flinching from it. They're not pretending that they can sweep it under the rug. Yes, using AI takes a lot of power. Yes, we have to reflect that in our, power consumption goals. Yes, we have to be realistic about what we're doing with this. But on the flip side, data and even AI itself can actually help in many ways with these goals. And so I was mostly impressed by the sort of the realistic approach that Qlik is taking to AI. And of course, yeah, it is going to exist and it is going to take up power, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, so there were 129 mentions of AI in the keynote yesterday. I kept track of that with a pen and paper, which I thought was kind of ironic. But at the same time, I think Qlik's messaging around AI is pretty intelligent, because one of the things that they emphasized in the keynote yesterday was that your AI is only as good as the quality of your data. And being a business intelligence company, their key focus is always going to be around data quality. We do a lot of projects in the business intelligence space, some with Qlik, some with other vendors. And one of the things we always try to emphasize with our customers is those pretty reports aren't really meaningful unless you have a good data model behind them. And the emphasis on data quality and some of the things they've acquired through acquisition to kind of help take them out of just being a dashboard software company into being a more complete data analytics company, I think make for kind of a compelling offering. I don't know how tightly that stuff is integrated. We saw some demos that you could see a couple of different user interfaces that were still in play. But I think in that market, they're beginning to have a compelling offering. And if you look at the competitive landscape, that market is going horizontal with like lots of services from single vendors. So whether it's Microsoft, Amazon, Databricks, Snowflake, everybody's trying to do everything in one product and try to sell it all together as kind of a single SKU. And I think they have a pretty competitive offering. The conference has been excellent. I think the keynote yesterday showcased some of their technology. Their use of AI seems intelligent. Like they put some guardrails around their own AI solution with, like, it can answer questions that it doesn't have that it hasn't been scanned for, so you're not going off a big global model, and that should prevent the kind of hallucination problems like Air Canada has seen in the last month or Google. So I think that there's some I'm hearing some good things from what they're saying, and you're seeing it kind of in the product too.
Yeah, I've seen some really interesting things on the both on the show floor and in the keynotes of the last couple of days. One of the things that really stuck with me was something I saw in one of the little theaters here in the expo hall, where they were talking about climate change and sea rise, and one of the customers was modeling this in the Qlik in their Qlik portal that they've got access to. So it was really interesting that they were able to show that off and show how they were showing sea rise and climate change. The other thing that really stuck with me that was one of the things that we saw in the keynote this morning. What they were doing down in Brazil, one of the Brazilian nonprofits down there won one of their awards, and it showed how they were using the Qlik product to actually help people that were victims of domestic abuse and domestic violence and stuff like that. So that really worked for me, because I know our company does a lot of work with a lot of these nonprofits as well, and so it was nice to see other companies doing that sort of thing as well.
So I'm going to try and put this into context of just the events I've attended this year. Let's start with NVIDIA GTC, Dell Technologies World AI Edition, IBM Think, SAP Sapphire, Qlik Connect, Google Cloud Next. All of these shows have a AI-centric theme. And I think each one of us have had some level of enterprise architecture experience. So if you're looking at the overall landscape of data and AI, let's steal, Dell's and NVIDIA's AI factory idea, getting from your data to intelligence, AI intelligence and business intelligence, decision making, process improvement, reduction of risk, increasing profit. These are the business outcomes that folks attending these shows want to achieve. But, I think I was on a phone earlier today and one of the executives said, I can't say we're creating an easy button, and I want to create a not so easy button or not as hard button for AI. And I think Qlik Connect is showing that not as hard button for AI. A community focused on, now I was talking to Jay earlier, the community focused on the value prop of the company. Help me have an opinionated view of how do I get to the outcome, knowing I have to deal still with my SAP environment, my infrastructure environment, ESG. I have all of these things on my plate. I don't need to cobble together a stack. And Qlik Connect is showing a complete community. I visited a booth earlier with Jay, back up as a button, just I don't need to understand extensibility of all the things you need to back up. I need to back up my Qlik environment. And that's what this community and this environment has been for the short time that I looked at it. It is helping to simplify a very, very complex problem. I don't have enough power. The power that I'm using is too much for my environmental impact. I don't understand my data. I don't know how to get the data. I don't know how to get from data to insights. I think you all hit on the pertinent points that this conference is simply about getting to the end of the value in a responsible way.
I, it strikes me, Keith, you've been to a lot of these conferences. The infrastructure companies, I think, have a very different perspective on AI than the data companies do. And I think as you move up the stack and as you talk to companies, you mentioned SAP, their event is going on this week as well. Certainly at Qlik, it seems to me that companies like this are much closer to achieving that kind of business value question than many of the infrastructure companies are. And also, it seems to me that companies like this are much more willing to have the conversations on the impact of what they're doing than what those infrastructure companies are. Because frankly, if you make a space heater that also does AI processing, you may not want to talk about power consumption and cooling. Whereas if you make something that makes use of AI, maybe you're more willing to have that practical conversation.
And I think from especially even a medium to enterprise size organization, it can make a lot of sense to do their AI in a hosted cloud environment like Qlik has, because that way you're not investing in GPUs, you're not trying to train your own model, you're training the model that they supply with your own data, and it's a limited subset of the data, so you're hopefully going to get some business value from that AI and not just, get it to spew random hallucinations or even things that are kind of meaningless in the broader context of business.
Yeah.
You don't need, if you're trying to analyze your sales reports, you don't need to know, you don't need the top 10 ways to explain it to an executive. You need to know what the insights are from your sales reports.
Stephen, you make a good point. A reporter asked Michael Dell and Jeff Clark, how do they ensure that the devices that they create, the AI that they create, is not used for evil? And Michael gave the answer that, I can't remember if it was Michael or with Jeff, but they gave the answer that PCs are tools. I can create a hammer, and that hammer can be used to create affordable homes, or that hammer can be used to create something that destroys, or it can be used to destroy directly. It is the responsibility of these companies to put out guidelines. I don't know if the infrastructure companies are shying away from the conversation. They were asked very pointed questions by very smart analysts way smarter than me in the energy space, in the energy space in general. But these folks have to be hand in hand. Do I need 4 GPUs for a process that takes one x86 or ARM processor? right-sizing the workloads for their environments. We trust companies like Qlik will build the abstractions that leverage the right-size infrastructure for us, so that we're not being irresponsible with our creation of asking questions that don't really have the value for the energy impact that it has. We need every level of the stack to be responsible in AI.
I think what was really interesting about the Qlik presentations we heard and in the keynotes we heard and presentations we heard was that they make it very clear that you can bring your data to them and they don't care where it's coming from. And that's something I found really interesting. I know that the infrastructure companies are grappling with ways to keep that data on-prem, to keep it someplace where they can continue to have revenue over the years. But at some point, there has to be a question of, well, does that mean that I create my own model? Do I create my own model and train it, which most companies will not be able to do? And in most cases, it's not a good idea to do it because you can just use a model that has been trained to do a certain thing. And in this case, with Qlik, to follow up on what you said about the cloud,
Yeah.
that they can do is they have the trained model available to you that you're not allowed to use until you put the filters of your own data in to protect you from things. So I think that the way we think about how do you architect an application becomes very different. So when you're looking at architecting an application where it has to have a 3-tier architecture and this and that, that's one thing. But now we're starting to talk about, all right, I have all of this data sitting in a data warehouse. It's continually filling up and filling up and filling up. This data warehouse is getting to the point that it cannot even sit on-prem anymore. This data warehouse, well, maybe I have some on-prem and I have some in a cloud, but the algorithms I need to run across it to pull any meaning out of it, they can't be powered by something on-prem. I'm using algorithms in the cloud to go across all that data to produce any meaning for it. So I think the architecting in the future is going to be based on these APIs, based on where do the algorithms and the processes I need to run this need to live? Do I need to have a whole server to run some kind of app that's going to do that for me? Or do I need to subscribe to something like Qlik that will do this for me wherever I am from their cloud? And I think the whole paradigm is how we think of an architecture has to change. And yeah, I can see that the vendors that build hardware are going to have a problem with that. This is what they've been afraid of, is this moment.
Yeah, and that does resonate, because if you think about on stage, one of those customer stories that we heard from was Vanguard. They used two very, very interesting words in that presentation. One was multi-cloud.
Yep.
The second was polycloud. And so there's probably a natural equilibrium for the business where you have a certain amount of on-premises, certain amount of not on-premises. And increasingly, for different companies and different realities, a lot of that information is going to be at an edge of a network. And one of the energy companies I happen to talk to, we've had unfettered access to all the customers, right? We've been in those conversations. And the energy company, who is literally they're consuming the hardware that uses the energy, but they're also interested in things like the solar that you were talking about with the UN. And in certain countries, there's an ability to put that energy back into a grid. There's a certain way for the actual end customer to put that energy into the grid and be paid for that. Yep. And so there's brand new economic models that are happening. Yep. And the way they're visualizing this to tell a story, not only for the executives to make a decision, an actionable decision, they're using Qlik to also tell the customer how things are going. Yep. And if you had picked every possible open source, to use that word, cobbling together, what would the timeline have been for them to accomplish the goals of that project as an energy company?
Significantly longer than just deploying a single solution.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think the ecosystem and the passion on the practitioner side that we're hearing is frankly because they're able to get things done.
Yeah.
And so power, time, money, all of those appear to be in the community of people that we've talked to so far. They seem to have found a platform, and I think you would actually call that out. Like they've bought into a platform, and because they've invested into that platform, the flywheel has been created. And so that's sort of what I've been picking up on. the energy company, they clearly realize, you can't continue to burn this. There's going to be solar, there's going to be hydro, thermal, there's all these options. But the ability to put the consumer to see it through their eyes, that's how they see efficacy. That's how they see becoming more than just quote unquote the energy company. So
it's interesting that this whole conversation, we haven't really talked about data platforms. We haven't really talked about, databases and analytics and any of that stuff. And I think that that's by design. I think that's really where Qlik is trying to go. I mean, I think they're trying to show that this is a product that is transformative for society, not just another data platform.
Yeah.
You guys are in the data space. What do you think?
They have the plumbing bits, but those aren't real sexy to talk about because
Yeah.
like
I tried.
ETL is just not very exciting. So the data's in this one database, and then we take it out, and then we run this Python because like somebody delimited it with backslashes and pipes and alternating formats.
And running Python scripts always makes a great demo.
Yeah,
Black box.
Totally. So like that part, but every business intelligence vendor I've ever seen never shows that part of the demo. It's always like, we have your data warehouse, then we have this flashy report. Yeah, it's gross, and that's what data engineers do.
Yeah.
I mean, like that. It's. I take back to what they said about AI, though. The important thing is to have a good data model and to build and kind of argue with Gina a little bit. If you have a data warehouse and it's a well-structured data warehouse, I don't care how many terabytes or petabytes it is, the structure of a fact dimension data warehouse, star schema data warehouse, is such that it will pretty much scale infinitely. It's like a really good database design. And once you get that in place and once you get those processes, you're well set up for doing this kind of analytics and building AI on top of that analytics because you have such a well-structured, efficient data model.
So it's really interesting. The vendors, especially the enterprise application vendors, are pushing the envelope on what the expectation is versus where the technology is.
Yeah.
The expectation, user's expectation is that I have my HSM, I have my CRM, I have my financial transaction data, I have my logistics data. I have all of this data in this magical data lake pool that's being updated constantly, and now I can just take a AI assistant and say, create a dashboard that shows me the most productive employees across this product line with the least amount of cost when it comes to logistics in North Africa. That is like the expectation that they're showing, but you two data experts know that if you don't have clean data, if you don't have well-formulated data, if I don't have the right vectorization of that data, performing that query, maybe I can perform it. Maybe I'll get hallucination, but the efficiency from a power efficiency perspective, I'm doing so much computation that it's either not worth the answer or I get the bad answer because I'm using the wrong model.
Well, and AI sucks at math too. So like you have to have the math, or large language models suck at math is what I should say. You have to have the math. But I mean, the thing you just described is when you were saying that, I was envisioning the sequel in my head of joining the dimensions to the fact table because like those facets are just kind of data warehouse dimensions. So that wouldn't be that out of the ordinary for like what you could do in a standard SQL query against a data warehouse. Where you get some insights is, and this is especially helpful in a business intelligence product like Qlik, is somebody doesn't maybe have to write that query, and if you have that data model ingested, they can then ask that question in the limited scope of the AI, the Qlik's AI, for example, and get a response back, and that's what's kind of helpful.
Yeah,
But
I think it was one of the really cool demos we saw was literally a business user could go in and instead of having to know where all this stuff is, they could literally put in the AI prompt, hey, tell me who my top 3 business users were in North Africa on these 3 products. And it would figure out all these SQL for you, and then give you back the query and give you back the report that you can then make a dashboard out of.
I've played with Copilot a lot in that space, and it does and you have to prompt it a little bit, but it does a really good job of like spitting out correct code for things like that.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably SQL's such a prolific language. There's such a corpus of SQL. The LLMs are really good at it, and it hasn't changed for the. It's all the changes have been additive. So you haven't seen significant changes in the language over time. So that helps too.
And I think, I think that one of the things that they said a couple of times this week was that this is not a race, and
Yeah.
that it's really, really important to get it right from the beginning. And if you get it, we're not trying to, you shouldn't go into a project saying, this is the wonderful, amazing stuff that's going to happen. But you really should go into the project, go slow, get the data right, do everything so that you can get to that point that you're achieving your goal.
Wait, could you clarify? I heard in one session that if you don't do AI, you're like,
Yeah, you might as well just go out of business.
you might as well just go out of business. So.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other story.
So, and I think what's important about the discussion of getting it to that view, that usable slice of slice, and knowing that you had the data right the first time, I think the end story was, how do we embed this in the right places to make it conspicuous for others to consume? So one of the other customer stories, they talked about how they actually talked about how many individual employees within the company interact on a daily basis, how many millions of logins and views they're getting. And these are all embeddings. That's the end goal. You want to have something that someone can look at, and it's real live, just in time. It is actionable metric. And to get to that point, you have to have so many of the data foundation elements that we talked about so far absolutely right. The validation is our check. It's safe to make a decision based on it.
Yeah.
By the time it's embedded, if you're off, it's already too late.
Yeah, Qlik showed something yesterday that was, I thought, really cool. It's like they had the scorecard for AI. I don't remember all the dimensions they had on the scorecard, but it was, data latency was one of them.
I actually have that here. Let me see if I can grab that while you're looking.
Yeah, data quality, and that kind of allows you to define trust and safety and the kind of things you're talking about. And they hadn't done it for all of their data.
Yeah, it was 6 dimensions, so it's too much to remember.
Yeah,
I have it here. So
there we go.
So they were talking about the data quality score,
Yeah.
and the dimensions were diversity, security, timeliness, consumability, accuracy, and discoverability.
Right.
And so the interesting thing about that for me was that they're not just talking about like accuracy.
Yeah.
Like you might think, oh, data quality, what's high quality data? Well, high quality data is accurate data. Well, okay, that's great, but accurate when?
Yeah.
Right.
And where is that data coming from? And is that data, able to be used in other contexts and so on? And so it's a much more nuanced approach than you would think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as data guys, what do you guys think of that?
Well, we gotta have the antidote before you inject. The Onion story about putting glue in a pizza was accurate. The Onion did produce the story.
Yeah.
The context, not so much. But
Yeah, I think, and this is, I can't tell you how many times I've said this on webinars, in sessions, everywhere. Data governance is the most important thing, and it's not an IT problem, it's a business problem. IT has to help facilitate it, but the business has to be invested in their data quality. And one of the things, the only place I really see Qlik lacking, well, two, and they're both related, I don't think they have a good master data solution, and I think they mentioned that. But there's not a whole lot. There's some work around governance in the product, but there's not a good governance solution. And there aren't many good governance solutions. Microsoft has one, and they're wrapping in the context of security too, so it gets confusing. But data governance is really hard, and very few organizations invest in it.
Yeah, I mean, data governance, for lack of a better term, isn't sexy.
Yeah.
It's one of those long, slow, slog-through projects that will probably take years to get through to figure out where
And you have
everything
to keep
is.
doing it.
And and it's not
Changes
something
every
to
time
stop.
there's new leaders. And
Exactly. Thank you.
Well, and to go off something Gina said, data needs to be accurate. It needs to be accurate all the time, and you can't release something unless it is.
Yeah.
Because the moment you screw something up, everybody knows about it, and walking things back gets really hard, really fast.
Well, and it can be dangerous too. Like
Yeah.
pizza on glue is gross and maybe it's dangerous, but like actually recommending to eat this yummy mushroom that will turn your liver to water, like Google did, that's dangerous. So
Yeah.
you can't have. I think the other thing the second thing on there was security, and I listened through a session of a user from South Africa from a big financial company, and that was one of the questions he got. How do you guys do security? And they had just started, I think, using the AI, but they were basically using Qlik to transform the data, do all the data cleaning and getting it all ready to go to where it was going. But the security answer was very interesting to me because his team didn't do the security. They passed it off to a security team that had a bunch of protocols around it that also had the responsibility to give the right views to the people that were requesting to do certain things. So it was their responsibility to do the masking and to make sure people could or could not see data within the system. So that's another thing that takes a really long time. That's really, really critical. That's probably why it's one of the very top things that you do. Because if you don't get the data right, and then if you let the wrong people or people who shouldn't be seeing something have access to something, then you're kind of hosed too.
From a data engineering perspective, one of the things we try to do, and you can't always do it, but in a data warehouse, is to not have any sensitive data in the warehouse. Obviously, there's going to be inherent business data that's secret, but like if you can do things where you're aggregating, so you don't really have PII in the warehouse, that's always a good approach. Because it makes the security a lot simpler is probably the right word. It's not easy, but it
Streamlined.
it streamlines the process.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear what have your engagements been around organizational maturity outside of the technology, because as we know, all of us have done infrastructure automation projects. If it's not a written down process that you know step by step that you can break down into chunks and you can automate section after section, AI projects are similar. If the thing is in a person's head and that person is the only one that knows how to do it, you can't put AI around it. You can't have the right data governance. You can't have the right security posture. You can't do those things. So a solution like Qlik is only as good as an organization's overall maturity around their processes and their ability Qlik's ability to walk hand in hand with the management consulting firms, the process engineering folks, to help their customers improve their internal business processes.
Marketing probably won't want us to remember this, but one of the things I remember from yesterday's keynote was garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage out.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was like a big slide with garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
Yeah, and
Which I don't understand because and you're going to talk about why it's important. I know, but like that's just such a dumb thing for marketing not to embrace that music.
yeah. I mean, so many organizations, like, if you can't tell me, there are a lot of organizations I've run into and talked to in the last 6 months that want to have AI solutions that can't tell me what their product sales were in what geography by color last quarter. And if you can't do that,
If you can't break it down, an AI can't break it down either because you don't know where the data is. You don't know how to figure this out.
Well, so that's the fever dream. Sometimes people believe that somehow the data is going to jump out of wherever it's hiding.
Yeah.
Self organize itself properly, code and label itself properly, and then become an actionable insight. And that's hard work. And I don't think there's any substitution for that hard work. And so all this emphasis on the strong foundation, this data foundation, until you even get to the point where you have the platform, you have to have data mastery. And if you do not have that, you're not going to get very far.
Without that, all bets are off. Like nothing's happening if you don't have a good idea of what everything is and where it all is. Otherwise,
Jump to the solution.
But to Keith's point, a lot of the vendors in this space, Microsoft, Snowflake, Qlik, even to an extent, they all show this flashy thing, and they never talk about the hard work that it takes to get to that point where you can show that report.
Yeah, none of them talk about the fact that you're going to spend 6 months before you can deploy any product.
Yeah, literally, there should be a disclaimer about it. Video edited to limit time.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, though. You don't have to spend a lot of time. We're going to talk about Microsoft. Let's talk about it, right? So you don't have to spend a lot of time. I can subscribe to Microsoft through Copilot right now, and in fact, I have for Teams. But because of the way we interact with our customers and really with each other, if you don't have good, not even data systems in place, if you don't have good business processes, it's not going to work because I don't get agendas to meetings from my customer. I have no way to record those meetings. I don't get follow-up notes from them. I have to make that all myself now if I want Copilot to be able to help me do anything.
Yeah.
So they are marketing it like I can jump right to this result and whiz bang, it's really awesome. All this thing is so easy for me. I have such a great personal assistant now. When in reality, those business processes need to be not just filled in, but they have to be constructed exactly as Microsoft expects them to be
Yeah.
for that
Yeah.
piece of AI to work, which is something I do find a little interesting about Qlik because they are able to, number one, they're telling people, don't go for the whiz bang at the end because this is going to take some time. Number two, they don't rely on something they've constructed to get to the end of the AI to be something that works. It's something you're going to construct from your data in your business process.
And as technology professionals and leaders, it's on us to remind management and business management that this isn't like a typical decision. AI is not real intelligence. And they're used to management consultants coming in and helping them make decisions based off of 80% of the information. And in their mind, oh, I only have 80% of the information and I need to make the decision. AI can do that for me. No, this is how we get the mushrooms. You should consume this mushroom that's going to turn my liver to water. We have to be, for lack of a better term, hopefully there's only technologists watching and listening to this. We have to be the adults in the room and say, hey, let's follow the advice of Qlik and let's take this slow. Let's take this in chunks. And if you don't, listen to Jeff Clark or Jeff Boudreau or Michael Dale on their journey with AI. They've taken it slow and in chunks. And they're a process-driven company, so it's on us to make sure that that from a using technology responsible. Technologists, we love the technology, but we need to make sure that we raise our hands and say what we're doing is dangerous.
And they're highlighting a progression approach as opposed to a leapfrog approach. And that progression, at one point in time, Dell had acquired Boomi, integration platform as a service. So what might have been 6 or 7 people doing duplicate, triplet integration between systems of record to make sure that it matched up in the 3 or 4 different places, the iPaaS would do that on a recurring basis. Now, do iPaaS break? Yes. Are data pipelines brittle? Yes. Does something need to watch that? Yes. But the next progression would be, I guess the example would be like an auto ML determining like what actually is in there. Is the right thing in your catalog? Is there something in your catalog that should not be in your catalog? And then you can take action on it. And some of this, I think, in the product stories I've heard, are absolutely not like removing humans entirely from the process. It's what's actionable for a human in that process to continue the progression. That's I think what I took away from a lot of it. The AI seems to be a target, like a North Star, but you don't jump immediately to it.
Was there any agents talking conversations around agents talking to agents? So Qlik engaging with other AI?
So there's a little bit of discussion around the API capabilities that are present. There's been some other tech field day things that were going on. So like Catchpoint was given a discussion in parallel before we got here. And one of the things they were outlining is the new performance paradigm is how well is your API to API performance communication taking place. Of the logging it's doing, that generates performance data. How are you taking action on it? So there's other parts of the ecosystem that are thinking about that agent-centric or assistant-centric, talking to other agents to enrich and improve an outcome. But that's probably a little bit further out. So another progression level.
I think that the platform itself here from Qlik is the result of lots of acquisitions that they've done, really intelligent, smart acquisitions.
Yep.
And the AI piece is very interesting. And you can pretty much use theirs. You can use almost any. That's what's interesting. They're kind of like Switzerland. You can bring anything from another wherever you're storing the data storage platform to whatever AI platform you're going to use. They have one of their own that works very well, and it's made for the data engineers that they can get in there in the back and lots of checking things for them to do things with. It's made for people that have no engineering and no coding experience, a very low code to get things up and started. It's a very different paradigm than we're used to seeing from things. And I think it's the way that things are going, honestly.
Yeah, and of course they did show also the designer
Yep.
where you can connect different components together and build a workflow to, and some of that could be AI, and some of that could be Python, and some of that could be SQL, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
They connect out to
Yeah.
Snowflake. They connect like they're connecting to what people are using already, and that's what the CEO said his goal was, that Qlik is, you bring the data to us wherever and however you're using it, and we'll make it work.
Yeah.
So it's very different paradigm than what we're used to seeing from AI, and it was almost too easy a little to build the things, but it's very interesting. I think,
What was that phrase? Was it doing business with you, not to you?
yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Qlik Answers thing looked incredible too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you could build your own kind of answer system based on whatever unstructured data you have.
And you can embed that in the dashboard, and you can slice and dice other pieces of the dashboard, and then answers would literally just shrink down based on what you had selected, what subset you were hunting for.
And you could put them anywhere. So if I'm using
Yeah.
Teams, if I'm using Slack, whatever, I could put that agent that I built right with using Qlik into so you never Salesforce. So you never leave where I'm working from to actually get insights on the data to help me sell or help me collaborate, whatever.
Yeah.
Just as a maturity footnote, like there's a lot of announcements. A lot of websites you go to now have that resident little assistive agent in the lower right-hand corner of your website. Hey, I think you want to buy something. Help me, Clippy, Spicy Clippy.
Right.
So their Spicy Clippy is powered by another company, ADA, and they actually already pre-positioned the content for the announcement as the first thing that chatbot would tell you about, which corresponded to the top of the banner of the website. So that's like a little attention to detail. It tells you just how platform thinking this organization is.
Yeah.
That's like literally the cherry on top.
Well, on that, I have to say that we have reached the end of our roundtable discussion. Thank you for the cherry on top. It's interesting to me that, here we are, a bunch of techies, and what are we saying? We're saying be careful, go slow, take it easy, don't expect too much from the technology, expect it to break, watch out for security. I mean, all those things that we've learned the hard way.
Yeah.
And I love that aspect of this, that, you might think that we would be in here just being like, yeah, technology, it does cool stuff, but that's not at all what we're seeing here. So thank you all for being part of Qlik Connect. Thank you for coming out here and giving us some time. Especially thank you for giving us your perspectives on these issues, for sharing your thoughts in articles during the presentations, on social media, good and bad. It's all interesting, and it's all worth it, and it's all worth listening to, because we all have valuable perspectives and valuable insights on these things. If you're watching this and you don't know what we're talking about, just look for Tech Field Day, look for Qlik. We had some great presentations from Qlik where they went through some of the products that we've talked about here, the Qlik Talent Cloud, the Pipeline Designer. They talked about AI. They talked about Qlik Answers in a lot of detail, and you'll see what those products are all about. As I said as well, you can find a lot of coverage from this event on LinkedIn, for example, on folks' blogs. There will be podcasts, there will be videos, and so on as well. And I do look forward to having those of us here come back together for future Tech Field Day events, meeting up at future industry events, and hopefully coming back to Qlik Connect in the future so that we can get an update on all this. So thank you very much for watching this Tech Field Day Roundtable. Go to techfieldday.com to learn more, or find us on YouTube for more content like this.